It finally stopped raining in Southern California, which is fantastic. With the amount that it's been raining, it feels like the sky's trying to wash away all the communism, but unfortunately the communism is still here after the rain. I woke up to this very interesting video that came out, Jordan Peterson testifying before Congress, and having watched it, of course, it's beyond interesting as Jordan Peterson's a genius. But really, it's eerie. It's eerie for a lot of reasons. One reason being that you can tell half the country, maybe less than half, is completely uninterested in understanding the world in a coherent way. In fact, they look at coherence as a form of untenable oppression. And so it's almost like speaking to somebody, in fact, it is like speaking to a group of people that have demonized the ability to make sense of things, have demonized speech, and have said that you don't exist as an individual. And all of those statements, of course, are presuppositions of the radical left and their ideology. So I want to show you this video.
Expressing my appreciation for the privilege awarded to me to testify here today. It really is an honor to be asked to do so.
1.4 million views in less than a day.
I'm not here to talk about January 6th or about any particular threat, insurrection, or protest, political or ideological, real or imaginary. I'm here to talk about the already extant and
right, basically saying that he's uninterested in the leftist construction of counterfeit oppression that they use to then engage in identitarianism and demonization of any person they disagree with. He's saying that what I'm here to express is ideas and that they're important. This, of course, is already rattling, unsettling, and infuriating to the left, who wants you to obsess over their constructions.
Expanding collusion of government and corporation, in restricting the individual freedom and autonomy on which the productive, generous, and stable psyche, economy, and state are themselves necessarily founded. I'll begin my comments, therefore, in the most general terms to shed light on the mounting problem. There are now 700 million CCTVs in China under the rule of the Communist Party. The system to which those electronic eyes are attached is the most complete state apparatus of surveillance yet imagined.
Now, I can say immediately that because the average IQ of the left is so low and their anti-intellectual stance is so staunch, that they're engaging in, when they listen to this, they engage in the level 1 analysis of why is he talking about CCTV cameras in China when this testimony should be about the United States. And this is because they can't think. People on the left don't abstract ideas, because to abstract an idea is to acknowledge a greater system of meaningful interpretation to understand the world, which acknowledges that the world is comprehensible, as well as speak to underlying truths that fall outside of their ideology. And both things are completely untenable, and so they are enraged as they hear him say these things. I really want people to understand how unthinking the leftist position is. It is overtly anti-intellectual.
The ability not only to recognize faces at a distance, but gait itself when facial features are hidden or obscured.
If it isn't obvious to you what he's talking about here, he isn't talking about cameras, he isn't talking about literal technology. He is talking about the implementation of that technology in accordance with an ideology that wants to destroy humanity and has always sought to destroy humanity.
Such capability can and will soon be augmented to the point where the movement of eyes themselves, monitored by high-resolution and intelligent cameras, will soon be sufficient to identify any aware and active party. The demented, naive, and prideful engineers who so enthusiastically helped build this system call it Skynet, after the rogue and all-seeing technology that took such a dreadfully wrong turn in the famous science fiction movie Terminator series, featuring artificially intelligent robot intelligences hell-bent on protecting themselves by destroying humanity. The name also references a well-known Chinese phrase describing the reach of the divine itself. The net of heaven is vast, yet it misses nothing, which aptly describes the capabilities of the new state apparatus. The system is integrated with the so-called Chinese social credit system, which
he's talking about existential threats to humanity here. The left is having none of it, though.
Towards its involuntary
because he's describing communist totalitarianism. Far left totalitarianism cannot be acknowledged in the ecosphere of really any person that doesn't subscribe to the counterfeit apparatus of virtue. In a moment here, you're going to see exactly how triggered this makes the left, and it shouldn't be surprising.
Participants with a score indicating their compliance with the dictates of the Chinese Communist Party, allowing for full control over access to everything they possess electronically. Most ominously, their savings and their access to travel.
Right.
Certainly all modern means of travel, but increasingly as the electronic gates come up, even by walking. If you're Chinese or a visitor, your access to the world can be reduced to zero if your social credit score falls beyond an arbitrary minimum.
This is the application of the left-wing ideology saying that if you are a bad person, you shouldn't get to exist in society. We already see in the left how people on the left say if you're a bad person, you shouldn't have the right to free speech on the internet. As the world is becoming more digitalized, your online life is paramount. It's incredibly important and a commonly held, in fact, the majority held leftist position is if you say certain things, you shouldn't be allowed to talk. You shouldn't be allowed to exist on the internet. You shouldn't be allowed to make money. You should be canceled. This is the ideological depravity of Marxism, of communism. China just has no qualms about implementing it because they are overtly communist and totalitarian. But this is the impulse of the left that we are seeing everywhere the left-wing ideology makes itself manifest. This is the reason why leftist ideologues in the United States Congress are unhappy with Jordan Peterson's testimony here because he is, well, he's doing so many things, but he's exposing how they're morally fraudulent, how they're completely intellectually bankrupt and incoherent. He's exposing the fact that their ideology is making itself known in the literal application of spyware and totalitarian control in people's lives. Beyond embarrassing for them, considering that they call themselves good people.
This allows you purposefully to be shut out of all activities that can be virtualized.
So you hear how that echoes the current leftist position in the United States. They try to cancel people. They are evil. It's obvious, everyone can see it.
And
the right doesn't try to cancel people. The left, though, thinks they're so much better than you that they should be able to say if you can feed your family or not or participate in social activities.
In a rapidly virtualizing world, this increasingly means all activities: driving, shopping, working, eating, finding shelter, even fraternizing with friends and family, as merely being in the presence of someone with a low social credit score means that your own score can be lowered.
That's very eerie and dystopian. I'm reminded of something Candace Owens said on the Fresh and Fit podcast, where she talked about how when you realize that the entire edifice of most of society exists to push propaganda, leftist propaganda, and indoctrinate people into the Marxist ideology, the left-wing ideology, to teach people the victimhood dichotomies and the corresponding counterfeit nature of virtue. When you come to reject them, you realize that the world is lying to people, and it's lying to people in a very, very dangerous way, and that the ideology that's propagating it is ultimately evil. But the people around you are still indoctrinated. For me, it happened at a far left-wing high school where everyone was being taught basically anti-reality. They were being taught resentment. They were being taught identity politics. They were being taught to demonize people based on intersectionality, to assign virtue and merit in accordance with victimhood. And when I discovered Jordan Peterson, when I discovered Ben Shapiro, they were the gateways to understanding the real world. But everyone else around me was still inside the matrix. They were still inside the brain rot of Marxism. And you feel pressured not to speak out because your social credit system, as Jordan Peterson is describing here, would be lowered just by them being around someone who is labeled the bad person. Remember, they don't engage with ideas. In fact, they say you're a bad person if you disagree with the left-wing ideology. That is the basis of cancel culture. You're a bad person if you disagree with the group ideology, so you have to be discarded. And it became very clear to talk about what I thought in high school because I knew that I would lose my friends. I knew that my social status would be honestly eviscerated if I said, you know what, I don't think that racism is systemic. I don't think you're a good person if you're a victim. I think individual identity should come first. In a culture that claims to be inclusive and diverse, you have to walk in total cognitive lockstep or your social score gets lowered. What China has is, again, simply the implementation of the left-wing communist Marxist fever dream. This is currently what exists at almost every level of institution. Jordan Peterson is describing it perfectly, and there's a reason why it's enraging to them.
This has also opened up the opportunity for the government to extract slave-like labor from its citizens, so burdened as the donation of free work to the state still constitute one means by which erring Chinese men and women can
Right, left-wing totalitarianism, enslaving people, it's very simple.
increase their score and remain part of human society. This is precisely the payment system most desired by the most tyrannical, not the work for me and benefit thereby that constitutes the contractual arrangement undertaken by free and sovereign citizens, but the work for me and I will lift the deprivation I imposed that has always been the leitmotif of the slaver. Why is any of this relevant to people in the West?
And the excess of compassion, right?
Well, because the technology that the Chinese Communist Party employs is an extension of Western technology.
The excess of compassion ends up being narcissism. That's why, by the way.
Because we already fell prey to the terrible temptation of lockdown employed by that state in the face of hypothetical crisis once and in the very recent past, because we're walking step by step in the same direction, partly because of the hypothetical convenience.
And by the way, it enrages him that it enrages Congress rather that he can say that because they know that at this point everyone sees them as failing in their response to COVID. The fact that people see them as failures for what they did, for the way that they acted, for the totalitarian impulses that were manifested, like vaccine passports that eventually went away, like being able to use movie theaters, etc., unless you were vaccinated, all of that, that is all social credit system, leftist, Marxist garbage, saying that if you don't agree with our ideology, you can't access society. The fact that they failed, the fact that people now see them as frauds for that, and that he can talk about it, it tears them apart. Really, it enrages them, which causes a feedback loop of victimhood. They call themselves victims for being seen as frauds. It's incredibly perverse. But then they call themselves good people as a result of being seen as frauds because they think that they're better than you and should be able to control your life. This is the reason why they are totalitarian.
An automatic recognition of identity, and partly because any problem whatsoever that now confronts us can easily be used to justify the increasing reach of the security and nanny state. It is said that Stone Age people, first confronted with cameras and their resultant photographs by modern anthropologists, objected to having their images captured as they feared the captivity of their souls. It turns out that such fear was prescient. The images that we leave behind while navigating virtual space are such close duplicates of our actual selves.
Any person that exists in the modern world knows this, that your online identity is huge. It's very important.
That the capture
if you have a brand, if you have a company, it's even more obvious.
Our essence is at this point all but guaranteed. We all now have our doppelgangers. We all live so much in the virtual world in consequence of our purchasing habits and modes of electronically mediated communication that our very selves have become reducible to a frightening degree to data, the modern equivalent of our footprint, with the same data making up an image of our identity. An identity which can be and is increasingly bought and sold by the invisible corporate brokers that still mostly use it to sell us what we so desperately and carelessly and conveniently want, but that can also be used to track, monitor, and punish everything we do and say. Behavioral scientists facilitate this process with their reprehensible nudging, the practice of pushing people in a given ideologically determined direction by manipulating invisible incentives behind the scene.
Right. Well, they're almost invisible. They become noticeable if you're smart enough and ask the right questions, as I did. It became very obvious. You can see the Marxist architecture to almost everything, even at colleges, even in classes, even in the statements that, you know, a professor might make when they ask you to analyze for power or oppression. It all becomes very obvious when meritocracy is subverted and replaced with some sort of perverse, corrupted narrative of counterfeit virtue as a result of being incompetent. This is also, by the way, the left worships incompetence, praises incompetence, and teaches women. You see this all the time in these podcasts that bring on delusional women. And if you can't accept that they're delusional, then you have to just live in society because they are delusional. The leftist ideology actually teaches these women to despise the most competent men. This is the reason why you see them speaking out, while they themselves are losers, single, childless, sipping $12 wine in their late 40s, attacking, slandering, and lying about the most impressive men on the planet. The left actually worships incompetence. It's at the root of their hatred for the individual and meritocracy itself.
Corporations track purchasing decisions, developing algorithms that with increasing accuracy track our patterns of attention and action, allowing for the prediction of what might next be most enticing, doing so not only to offer us what we want, but to determine and shape what we need. Governments can and are colluding with these corporate agents to develop a picture not only of our actions, but of our thoughts and words, so that deviation from the desired end can be mapped, rewarded, and punished. The development of a digital identity and currency is nothing more than the likely end consequence of such inclinations, and the combination of both can and will facilitate the development of a surveillance state, the scope of which optimistic pessimists of totalitarianism such as George Orwell could scarcely imagine. The new AI systems, which are so rapidly emerging, do nothing but increase this danger, providing for the possibility of a super surveillance whose scope exceeds anything that mere unaugmented humans could imagine, while also making it...
They want to interrupt him now, but because he's talking about left-wing surveillance and censorship, it would be a poor choice of timing. But pay attention.
Certain that even the perceptions that in the real world shape our attitudes, conduct, and personality can be manipulated to the degree that we will not even be able to see a reality outside which that has been constructed by the superstate, the ultimate fascist collusion between gigantic self-interested corporations and paranoid, security-obsessed anti-human governments. We're already selling our souls to the superstate for the purposes of immediate gratification, while being enticed to do so by
Mr. Chairman, could the witness be asked to summarize, please?
You imbecile, what are you saying? Summarize? Oh my gosh, what a moron. What a moron. That's like, okay, remember, that's like that scene in the movie about Mozart where the idiot statesmen tell Mozart, can you just delete some of this music? Can you just delete some of these lines? It's too much. And Mozart just looks at him and he's like, what are you talking about? Delete some of these measures. There is not a single note more, nor a single note less that needs to be here. You're trying to tell Jordan Peterson how to communicate? Are you a moron?
Do I have my...
Let him talk.
5 minutes, or do I not?
You've gone over 5
Oh,
minutes.
I'm sorry. I can certainly...
If the witness could summarize, we're always a little lenient with the time. If you could summarize...
I'll take 10 more seconds.
Sure.
With increasing ability to monitor...
The left is enraged. He's exposing them, like I said.
Not only the actual attention patterns and behaviors of its citizens, but to predict those that are most likely...
By the way, this ends in an extremely perfect way. Extremely archetypally perfect. So pay attention. You really couldn't ask for a better ending to this.
Execution of even potential crime becomes ever more likely.
He's talking about the dangers of left-wing censorship, and they're enraged.
You have nothing...
They want to censor him. They want him to stop talking.
...to hide.
Meanwhile, they bring on brainless DEI hires to talk about victimhood and socialism. It's insane.
"Will have nothing to fear" will be the slogan commandeered by those most likely to turn to surveillance to protect and control. What was the famous Soviet totalitarian joke attributed to Lavrenti Beria, head of the secret police? Right. Show me the man and I'll show...
Again, left-wing communist regime that would enforce thought crimes against people.
...show you the crime. Those words were true enough in the time of Stalin's KGB, and the police were secret enough then as well. But that's nothing compared...
Right, they're very secret. Just as right now, the levers of the censorship and the enraged, deformed hypocrites and narcissists currently on the left that are trying to censor people, they are secret because their actions are so immoral, they're so reprehensible, they're so perverse and corrupt that they have to remain secret, or the public wouldn't stand for it. Now that censorship apparatus is taking on the format of digital algorithms. You see this type of corruption in the AI that generates images and words, that has a anti-reality left-wing bias.
...compared to what we can and likely will produce now. A police so secret that we will not even be able to detect their comprehensive...
Right, because it'll be in code, literal computer code.
...and subtle activity. Monitoring crime so pervasive that everyone under the dictates of the system will have something to hide
Regular
and
order,
much to
Mr.
fear.
Chairman.
Right as he finishes.
Yes, well,
right as he finishes.
Like the dictates of the system will have something to hide
Regular
and
order,
much
Mr.
to fear.
Chairman.
Something to hide and much to fear. Then you have the incompetent, narcissistic, degenerately female voice. Can we move on from this? They are anti-intellectuals. They are anti-truth. Of course, they worship incompetence, as I described.
Everyone under the dictates of the system will have something to hide
Regular
and
order,
much to
Mr.
fear.
Chairman.
The last thing I'll say before I end this video, the degenerately feminine, low verbal IQ psyche that defines the left's resentment is enraged by competence. for the same reason that they're enraged by masculinity. They're enraged by that which judges them objectively. Objectively meaning outside of their ideology. There's a reason why they try to erode the notion of objectivity itself. Because anything that supersedes the ideology of Marxism, the ideology of being a good person as a result of being a victim in accordance with intersectionalist identity, anything that deviates from that is untenable. Anything that supersedes that is oppression. It's discriminatory. The leftist ideology is actually simple in its nature when you understand it well enough. So you must understand what's going on here. Subscribe to the channel, guys. I will continue to expose them. This isn't, this architecture, as I described, being very obvious to people who can pay attention, is obvious to me because of my experience. And so I will continue to show it to you in countless different formats, as I already have on my channel. Go watch previous videos that I've made. You can find the architecture of the left expressed almost everywhere in the degeneracy of delusional feminists, in the speeches of presidents, in tweets, in basically any format that you can fathom. So subscribe to the channel, and I'll catch you guys next time.